Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Colorado Living. I'm Nicole Baker. Today we're gonna be talking about the 5 things you're absolutely going to hate about living in Colorado. If that's something that you wanna know more about, go ahead and keep on watching. But before we get started, I have to let you guys know I am a licensed realtor here in this beautiful state. So if relocating and moving to Colorado is something that you're interested in and you need help, go ahead and reach out to me. My number's popping up on the screen. I love talking to you guys and I love helping people through the relocation process. Just like I relocated here, I wish I had someone that could have walked me through the entire thing. So go ahead and reach out to me and let's go ahead and get started in today's video. Okay guys, starting with con number 1, we're gonna talk about weather. Weather is the major topic. It seems like everybody's asking me when they're thinking about moving here to Colorado. I totally understand where you guys are coming from. If you've never been here or you've only visited once or twice and within different seasons, I can totally see where you're coming from. When I moved here, well, before I moved here, I visited many times as my boyfriend's family lives here and it kind of made me fall in love with Colorado. I visited pretty much in every season and I really learned what it's like to live here before actually moving here. So I know not everybody has that opportunity, especially if you're moving because of work and you kind of have to get up and go right away. You don't have that luxury. So I'm here to explain that to you. So number 1 thing is going to be snow. I know people ask me about the snow all the time. And why a lot of people hate it is because it gets cold. I think that's pretty obvious. Not only does it get cold, but you know, when, for example, when you're driving in the snow can be obviously extremely dangerous depending on what type of vehicle you have and what type of conditions and how bad the snow is. Something you want to keep in mind if you're moving here is you definitely want to have an all-wheel vehicle and or a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Sometimes those rear wheel or 2-wheel drive vehicles, they just don't hold up in the snow quite well and their traction isn't as good and it's not meant for the conditions of snow. So something to keep in mind is you want to make sure you have a safe vehicle. Another thing that I noticed, and one of the first things when I first ever visited here, it was actually a blizzard, funny enough. And it was seriously 0 degrees outside. And the next day after the blizzard, the ground is obviously still covered in snow and it is very wet and very cold outside. You know, snow is dirty, and I'm sure if you're coming from snow, you're familiar with snow. It's not as bad as some of those other states where it's like, for example, Michigan, where you're getting tons and tons of snow and it's there pretty much all winter long, it never melts. Thank God in Denver, it definitely does melt down. It takes a couple days depending on how many inches of snow you have, but it is quite ugly the 2nd or 3rd day after snow. The first day, absolutely gorgeous, but definitely something that you want to do is make sure you're wearing the proper attire. I definitely did not wear the proper attire visiting here for the first time. Like I've said in other videos, I swear I was wearing leggings and all white shoes. How does that make sense? It doesn't. So you want to make sure you're wearing the proper attire. When I moved here, the first thing I did was purchase winter boots, something that I can actually walk in the snow in. And you know, it made my life a lot easier. Also, another thing is making sure you have layers. When it gets cold, you're gonna wanna make sure you're wearing layers because not only is the temperature cold, but typically you're gonna have a little bit of wind as well. So you want to make sure you have a couple layers. If it's a long sleeve and then you have some sort of windbreaker or we'll say long sleeve hoodie windbreaker, because that makes it the easiest and you're not feeling like a whole marshmallow. I know that that's really hard, especially for my girls out there. Like dressing in the winter when it snows is a little bit more difficult, but I can definitely help you guys on tips and tricks when it comes to that. There's leggings that you can buy, and these are for men too. I think my boyfriend wanted a pair, but they're leggings and they're fully lined with fleece. So you get really warm and then you can still have the cute look of leggings. Anyways, moving on, it does get cold. I know that that's a con for a lot of people. If you don't like super cold weather when it snows, I don't know that this is the place for you. But a lot of the people that I talk to that are moving to Colorado, like that's something that they absolutely love about it. They can't wait to get into the snow. And I know all the pictures. I followed like tons and tons of Facebook groups before I moved here, and everyone would always post pictures of, you know, the snow or like a white Christmas. That's everybody's like dream, I think, especially me coming from Arizona. That was like, oh my God, a white Christmas. That's never happened to me before. So if cold weather is an absolute no, you hate it and you can't stand it for even a few days, definitely don't move here. On to the next thing, we're going to be talking about kind of a 2-for-1 when it comes to cons. It's going to be dryness and also elevation. So we'll go ahead and start with dryness and the climate essentially here in Colorado. If you are moving from a state like Florida or some of those back east states where you are experiencing extreme humidity, you are going to definitely have an adjustment period when it comes to moving to Colorado. You're going to need tons and tons of lotion. You're also going to probably experience some sort of bloody noses. I know that that's a common side effect of moving from somewhere extremely humid and then moving somewhere extremely dry. I, fortunately enough, didn't have to experience any of these coming from Arizona. The climate is extremely dry already, so I didn't really have any experiences. My skin still did get a little bit dry, so I'm not sure if that's because of the weather being colder here or if it has to do with the humidity. I don't think it has to do with the humidity, but fact check me if you want. You're going to experience, depending on where you're coming from, some dry skin and dry hair, dry scalp, but there's nothing that can't really be fixed in regards to that. Definitely drinking tons of water. Also, if you have any medical issues, I think that if humidity is something that really helps your health issue, whatever it may be, I don't know that Colorado is going to be the best climate for you if you cannot deal with dry climates well. Going on to the next thing, we're going to be going into elevation, and this comes into drinking lots of water as well. With our elevation here in Colorado, we are the Mile High City, so we're about a mile above sea level. With that comes a few complications if you're not used to living in a high elevation state. That usually has headaches as one of the symptoms whenever you are moving to a high elevation area. Also dizziness and fatigue, those kind of things, especially the headaches. That's something that I experienced a little bit when I moved here, not too much, which is nice, but that is elevation sickness. Elevation sickness is definitely annoying, but it's nothing that we don't typically get acclimated to. I definitely don't experience anything like that nowadays. But something to keep in mind, you're gonna wanna drink tons and tons of water whenever you move here. And I'm only mentioning the elevation because I know that is something that other people mention. And I don't want you guys to be scared of that. That's something you can easily get acclimated to. But if you guys have more questions, shoot them in the comments and I would love to answer them. But I think you guys will be fine with elevation. But if it's something that you absolutely hate having a headache for a couple months, I don't know, you might want to visit before moving here. Okay guys, moving on to bad traffic and bad drivers. Something to debunk right away, I think, is the bad driver stigma that Colorado has. I really don't think we have tons of bad drivers. There's a couple different variables that come into play when we're talking about bad drivers. I think one is going to be when people move here, they love the scenery. And just like me, when I moved here, I'm like, taking in all the views and all of that, right? Even when you're driving on the freeway, it's like you could see the beautiful Rocky Mountains, snow-capped, like it's gorgeous. So of course I'm gonna be looking, and somehow that just makes you a little bit slower. And with 70,000 people relocating here last year, that is probably what about 70 other thousand people are doing on the road as well. So something to keep in mind is everyone's chill here. We're relaxing. We're driving the speed limit. Me in Phoenix, I'm going 20 miles over the speed limit. Me in Colorado is a completely different Nicole. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, a lot of people relocating here pretty much at this point, like everyone that I've talked to is not a local, and I think that that's what locals say as well. Tons and tons of people are moving here, and when you have tons of people moving here that have never driven in snow or rain, which we have tons of, also wind, it's going to be definitely an adjustment period when it comes to driving. So I think that's what we're seeing with the bad drivers, is really slow drivers and people that can't necessarily or aren't used to driving in snow. So they definitely drive a little bit slower. I know that was me when I first moved here. I could not drive in snow, or I could drive in it, but I was just scared. So of course I'm going a little bit slower, right? But that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is bad traffic. Personally, and you guys have heard me mention this in my other videos, I don't experience tons of traffic. I don't know if it's because I don't go in the places that do have a lot of traffic. Something I have noticed is the northern cities and north of Denver experience a lot more traffic than the south side. And my assumption behind that is because the E470, I have put that in my other videos before and how convenient it is, but it is a toll road. Toll roads cost money. So I think that those, obviously are gonna be a little bit slower, and that's pretty much all on the south bend of the state, versus the north side only has one little road, and it always has work being done on it, and it always has traffic, and tons of people use that main road access to go up to the mountains. So I think it just becomes overpopulated very easily, unlike the south side where you have tons of side streets that you can be taking, also the E470, which is awesome access, and then you also have the I-25, which doesn't get too packed. Obviously during those traffic times, you're gonna have a little bit more traffic, but if you stay away from the city, preferably within those traffic times, you're not gonna have that much of a bad experience. I would say it's nothing compared to some of the Phoenix traffic that I've experienced in the past, with only 5 million people living in Colorado versus some of the other states like Phoenix, for example, where there has 8 million people, and that's only current residents versus all the people that travel to Phoenix from Canada or even Colorado or some of the snowy states for their snowbird time, right, to get away from the snow. Tons and tons of traffic here. I just haven't experienced too much traffic, and I'm not gonna be mad about that, of course. Also, there's tons of suburban streets that kind of all weave in together. I know I've mentioned that in my other videos as well, is you don't really have to deal with going on those main strips. Some places, of course, that's the only way that you're gonna get somewhere, but there's probably 3 other access points that you can kind of take, if it's not the freeway, to get somewhere in Denver, and that's something that's really convenient when it comes to traffic. But again, if you absolutely hate traffic and you're especially thinking about the north side of Denver, I don't know if it's going to be right for you. Okay guys, moving on to the next thing, something that you're probably extremely interested in knowing, the cost of living and the housing. Something that you are probably watching my channel to learn more about, right? If you're planning on moving here, your housing and your cost of living is going to dictate whether or not you're truly gonna move here. And something to keep in mind is it is fairly expensive to live in Colorado. Not necessarily the cost of living. Yes, it's a little bit more than the national average, but when it comes to housing is quite expensive here. But there are different price points, and I think that some people just get really sticker shocked when they come here, especially when you're moving from states like Texas and Arizona, which are some of the most popular states to move from to Colorado right now. It is very shocking to see those going from an extremely affordable state to maybe not so affordable, and seeing what you can get for that kind of price. I know that it's hard to picture, but also something to keep in mind is the square footage. Not a lot of people mention this, and when they talk about the cost of housing here, is that they don't mention that the square footage is actually pretty similar to those states as well, like Arizona, for example. I'm also licensed there, so I can speak on that. The square footage and the price per square foot is about the same. It's just that the houses in Colorado are 10 times bigger than the average household somewhere else in a different state. When you have a basement, you really have doubled essentially your square footage on your home, and majority of the houses here in Colorado have basements. Something that I've seen a couple builders doing to limit the costs of housing here in Colorado is putting houses that don't have basements, because it cuts the square footage in half, essentially cutting, maybe not the pricing in half, but cutting a big portion off because you're not having such a big house. So that's something to keep in mind too. The housing isn't as extreme as we might think. Also, coming from states like, again, California, where Colorado is another major state that Californians are moving to right now. It is a lot cheaper here than it is in California. So depending on where you're coming from, affordability is all in the eye of the beholder, right? So something that is, a condo might cost you, depending on where you're looking at, the average price point, and I'm not going to generalize to a specific city because that would probably just take too long. But Colorado in general, you're probably, if you want a condo, townhome, anywhere between starting $300. Obviously, I'm not saying it's going to be the most decked out condo that you've ever seen, but it's a starting point for a lot of people. Another thing is a single family home. You probably can start on a single family home, a very first time home buyer friendly price, $500. I know it seems extremely crazy, especially, with the interest rates going up. I understand it's a little bit harder and those payments seem very shocking when you get here. But depending on where you're coming from, also the property tax. Texas has one of the highest property taxes, and Colorado actually has the third lowest property tax in all of America. So you would maybe be surprised by the cost of the housing here. Also, guys, something to keep in mind, and we won't go too deep into this. This is something I usually say for my phone calls with you guys, is interest rates. Interest rates flex all the time. There's definitely options for you guys, like a 2-1 buy down and or refinancing in the future. You want to make sure that you're not missing out on all the equity that you could have today because of the interest rates. All it matters is not necessarily the interest rates, but is it affordable for you? Does it fit in your budget? Because interest rates will go down and they will go up always, and you can always refi, and then you can have all that equity that you earned in that property over, say, a year time when the interest rates drop down. So now you have a lower interest rate and you have equity versus waiting a year and then all you have is a lower interest rate. But the pricing of the home has gone up anyways because someone else had that house and they got to take advantage of the equity. So something to keep in mind if you are thinking about moving to Colorado is the pricing, but there are definitely options for everyone. So just reach out to me and I will help you guys through what neighborhoods to look through in order to get the best bang for your buck. To something that isn't really talked about much, but I think I want to mention it, is how touristy Colorado is becoming over time. So it has become very, very popular to not only move here because of how beautiful it is, but it's also very popular to visit. You have some of the absolute biggest tourist spots in all of America in Colorado. One being the Rocky Mountain National Forest. We have 4 total national forests here, so those are always visited. We also have some of the best breweries, so people that enjoy that kind of vacation are definitely coming here to visit those breweries. Also, camping and trails and stuff like that, they have become extremely overcrowded. But good news is the less known places and outside of these main travel areas are definitely going to be less crowded. And especially when you move here, you're going to eventually become a quote unquote local, right? So we're going to be traveling and going to these places that not all the tourists are going. Just like, for example, I had a lot of friends that were from New York. So my New York people, they're not going to the same places that all the tourists are going. they're not going to be going to, you know, the World Trade Center on a daily basis. They're going to be going to these little tiny spots that pretty much nobody knows about. And that's what's so fun about living here is we aren't necessarily, like, I'm not visiting Denver, the city, every single day. I'm not going to Rocky National Forest every single day, or even like, I do go to Estes Park a lot. I know you guys have heard me mention that, but that's just a me thing, I think. You have other options, and to me, sometimes when there's a bunch of tourists and a bunch of people having fun, it honestly makes it a little bit more fun. And maybe that's just me because I relocated here. I think the true locals get kind of annoyed at how many people are moving here because it does become crowded. I just think of it as a huge party. So I hope that you could think about it like that too, but there are definitely some areas in Colorado that are going to be less touristy. So if you want to know more information about that, you guys can reach out to me. If you're looking for more of a, say, we call them sleepy towns, where, you know, all you have is your gas station and you don't mind driving 20-30 minutes to a grocery store or fun things to do, there definitely are places like that, especially in the mountains. You have options, so just reach out to me and I can help make sure that you get into that neighborhood that makes most sense for you and your family and your lifestyle. Okay guys, that's it. So hopefully today you enjoyed this video and I was able to provide you guys some awesome information that you might have not known otherwise. My number is popping up on the screen. Again, I love hearing from you guys and I love helping you relocate here. It's not an easy process and you want someone that's familiar with the relocation process. I moved here and I understand your guys' struggles and I understand things that might not come to mind when you're working with a local, quote unquote. So go ahead and reach out to me. I love helping you guys, but until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.